people didn't think it was serious. Like Mike, he designs playgrounds. I had even people that were quite close to me say, are you really going to do a playground? You're an artist. That's a bit below you, isn't it? But I think it was worth it because now it has expanded people's ideas about what art can be. It's a huge risk to me. I'm the one who's legally exposed. I'm the one who's financially exposed. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. Negligence isn't sexy or interesting. So in order to deliver a project like this, you have to take it really seriously. I put a lot of my energy and time and money into starting to become an artist. And then when the earthquake hit, going across this realization that I may never ever go back, and I potentially had lost everything I'd ever owned. I was actually in bare feet at the time, in the middle of this city hut broken down. And I remember looking up at the building and going, is it worth keeping going with this thing?
Welcome back to the Installation Art Podcast, the world's #1 podcast about installation art. In each episode, you will hear about the joys and challenges of the medium and get a behind-the-scenes look at the careers and processes of internationally renowned guests. I am your host, Anastasia Parmson. Today's episode is a little different because we're recording this conversation from inside the artwork. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, you will see. My guest is Mike Hewson, a New Zealand artist based in Sydney whose practice sits somewhere between art, engineering, and play. Mike is best known for interactive public installations that invite people, especially children, to climb, explore, touch, and make it their own. We are recording this conversation inside his Mammoth project, The Keys Under the Mat, Mike's installation that is currently on view in the tank at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, in a former underground oil reservoir transformed into a play park. This work includes a playground, a barbecue area, showers, a sauna, a steam room, even a laundry, this soundproof recording studio, and a small artist residency hovel, as he calls it. A huge logistical, conceptual, and technical undertaking. So as we're recording this conversation, outside the walls of this soundproof booth are visitors and children playing, grilling, splashing water all over the gallery floor, unheard of. It is an absolute pleasure to introduce my today's guest, Mike Hewson. Let's start with some quick, easy questions. How's your work-life balance?
Is that a trap question? Work-life balance I'm working on it. Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. I think projects like this are sort of, for me, it is a once-in-a-lifetime project. I don't intend to do anything like it in the future in terms of how it was delivered. Yeah, it does require a certain level of imbalance to kind of pull off. Yeah, I guess what we'll talk about will probably lead into this question of what is required to deliver large-scale installation projects, particularly ones that do something, and the resources and energy required. And I have a big interest, at least this year, in figuring out sustainable ways for those to continue and not deplete everyone else's energy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, there was one of those like psychology graphs of performance versus stress level. And you sort of get to this point where it tips up to like a productive level of stress. And then there's a kind of dotted line of the fantasy performance that would happen if you increase stress, but really it just like dives. And so I think in the longer term of a career or even the viability of these kinds of projects, you need to be very mindful of everyone's energy and stress. But sometimes you do need to have these outlier projects like this one to like reset the dial. And then you can learn from that about ways that you could more enjoyably or sustainably do that in the future.
Mm. Do you have a favorite beverage you like to drink while working in your studio?
Ooh, I've gotten quite used to the tradesman coffee, which is just like instant coffee, Moccona.
Oh, right.
I'm even using like real country style powdered milk with some raw sugar.
Ooh.
Yeah. Very low
Very
budget.
tradey.
Very low budget, but it's got a certain charm to it.
Mm-hmm. And do you like to listen to anything while working?
It does range. Yeah, there was an ambient phase. There was a kind of Afro piano phase, ballet funk phase. There's, various music. It also depends on your staff and what they like to listen to, because sometimes the more important staff need to choose the music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's go back in time a bit. Tell me briefly about where did you grow up and what kind of stuff were you into as a kid?
I was born in Dunedin, New Zealand, Aotearoa, and I grew up in a farm adjacent sort of property. So I went to a school that had 11 people when I was there.
Wow.
So it was a very small country school where, in hindsight, there's very little parameters around what was acceptable lunchtime activities. So there was a big paddock out the back that we could explore. There was sheep. One of the kids brought their motorbike to school. So there's this sort of quite, bring your pet to school day, but people brought like cows, and I don't actually know, I think cows might have been a stretch. All sorts of farm animals were brought to school. And it was a fairly free-formed place that I guess has led to me doing these. They're not that risky, but they're certainly more exploratory than people are used to in the city.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come to discover art?
My grandmother, Nairi, was an artist and big participator in the arts community in Christchurch. She ran a little gallery in the late 60s, early 70s. Sort of sucked my grandfather into making that a big priority in their lives. And I wasn't around it so much, but there was a certain kind of beauty and allure to the work that she did with artists. And I think that mulled away in the background. And it was always a sort of assumption going through school that art would be a part of my life. I didn't end up following through with much art at school. But as soon as I completed school, I immediately started painting, and I did like a gap year hitchhiking around. And when I was at engineering school, so I took the more structured, safe route, and I was painting during that period. So it was sort of this slow build. I guess there was a part of me that needed some sort of structure, or that was where my curiosity was. And then in my late 20s, early 30s, that's when I went to art school and did a master's. And I'm a bit of a I'm slow in that I come to things gradually, but I'm still here.
So you said you were painting. How did you get into making installation stuff?
I guess my first artwork was landscape painting, the most maybe kitsch, maybe romantic kind of. Well, it was at least my curiosity that led me into art. And as I kept going through, I was curious about what my particular contribution might be. And in Christchurch, there was a big earthquake in 2011, and I'd already started exploring larger scale projects, but they were more like mural, kind of like, JR's paste ups.
Mm-hmm.
Interacting with architectural scale works, but I was doing images of architecture. And then after this big earthquake, which destroyed a lot of the city, I was grappling with how to make sense of it for myself, but also how I could contribute to other people understanding all the losses and the rapid changes. So I sort of used my engineering creds to smuggle myself into the city, or at least use that platform to get people's trust in order to go into an unsafe environment and do these large-scale paste-up works, which were effectively images of spaces, or that exact space, but from a different perspective. So they're sort of slightly trompe-l'oeil, and that was more immersive, so it was much more related to the scale of a body in relationship to a building. And that sort of progressed from there into my first major sculpture work in Wollongong, which was after my New York period where I studied at Columbia. And I didn't notice a tangible shift while I was at art school, but afterwards that was when I first did a sculpture project, which is physical, permanent, as opposed to all the previous works were very impermanent in that even if the building was only going to be up for 2 weeks before it got demoed or the earth shook and brought the building down, I was okay with that. But the next project, when people actually pay you to do something, there's a certain accountability to the public to make it last.
Mm-hmm.
So it was less from my desire for it to endure and more for the viability of the art form that it endure. Yeah, so as soon as you do that, you have to choose materials which are permanent and can handle UV and rain, which is like not very many materials.
Especially the
Yeah.
Australian UV.
Especially Australian UV and humidity. So that's basically leaves you with stone, any sort of mixed masonry like concrete, various forms of steel, but still they need, if they're not stainless, they need paint systems. Plastics often last fairly well. I've been using like living material like trees and they regenerate. And then there is some sort of fabrics which can last in the UV, but then you have to build them in with some sort of maintenance schedule that they get refreshed because they're also vulnerable to the other veneer of weathering, which is graffiti or human meddling, box cutter or whatever other sorts of implements are used to muddle with the artwork. So I think it's interesting to move from an artist being inside presenting artwork in a gallery where really any material you can get away with. I guess the work that I'm making at the moment is the opposite of, say, like Sarah Z's work, which is little piece of nylon with a beautiful bit of paper stuck to it, like the most kind of lightweight and ephemeral things. If you let a snotty little kid run around in a place like that without rules, it just doesn't work, unfortunately. So it really informs the material choice and the proportions of an artwork. And I think that it is the big, I guess, interactive. I haven't used that word, but people use that in relationship to my artwork. As soon as you allow people to have less rules around a sculpture, it very quickly changes its form, material, and structure. And,
So what prompted you to start making playgrounds as your artworks?
So initially in the Wollongong project, the government architect's office had renovated one of those like 80s malls. A lot of them were pedestrianized, a lot of like brick fountains, steel archways, a lot of kind of bitsy landscape architecture. And they'd sort of modernized it by stripping it all out, leaving a fire access corridor, which ends up, as regulations get revised and revised, that corridor's larger and larger. So you can put less and less in public space. And they also had a sort of a public nuisance issue with people gathering in certain areas. There was like a methadone clinic along the strip, and it ended up being a great gathering place. So council decided to strip out most of the seating or make it very sparse, which makes it less social, but it also means that no one wants to be there.
Right.
So in this project, they were like, we need to do an artwork that somehow works with our identity, and also no one wants to come here. It's not really part of the brief, but I took it on. I was like, well, we need to shift how the space is used. So then it brought in this idea of use, and maybe the artwork could do a lot of things at once. So we had these forklift rocks, kind of like rent a rock thing where I carved like forklift tines into sandstone that were placed throughout to make places of gathering. And then there was some more just sculpture proper, palm tree up a lamppost. And down the bottom end, the council had removed a playground in the reno and not replaced it. And I was like, maybe I can do a sculpture playground. Not thinking too much about the playground part, but more as a opportunity for sculpture. And it turned out it was maybe the more interesting part of that project. And also it was the one I got the less grief for, because the public were really angry at the artworks. They saw it as very pretentious.
Yeah, I saw that there was quite a bit of flack about, especially that palm tree up the pole.
Really
how did it feel getting this kind of feedback for your first big project?
Yeah, I wasn't quite ready for it, because I think one of the big misunderstandings with these public projects is as soon as you start making stuff at an infrastructure scale, it's so costly. Like you have to pay the same builders and construction workers who build roads, highways, bridges and houses to do your project. And if they are an artwork, they're often much more interesting, much more complex. So the budgets required are much higher, but the public don't want to know about that. And that project was hugely over budget and I had to wear all the costs. I even went into debt that I'm still paying off on that one. And so when people are grizzling about you sort of, again, they don't really want to know the actual truth. I think for that project, there was a published budget of like 430,000 Australian dollars.
Which isn't really that much.
Which isn't that much, but the media sort of portrayed it in a way that the palm tree up the pole
cost all that money.
That, when really it was like about 15% of the project. So I delivered on now. I wouldn't do that project for probably like a $2 million project. But I was young and keen and willing because I knew that also you have to prove, the projects like that hadn't been done before, like a kind of interactive physical playground sculpture where it does a lot of things without barriers around it. So I knew that I had to earn that respect. But the playground part of that, to your earlier point, was the bit that I didn't get so much scrutiny over because it did something. And also, there's not many public art opportunities. So I was like, if there is some infrastructure money to be spent on playgrounds, and here we are doing a lot of public realm development, huge number of developments. And so there is a need for these bits of infrastructure. So I was like, how about I convince these people commissioning projects to combine their landscape architecture budget, the building budget, whatever the art budget, whatever other community budget there is, package it together, and I'll deliver on this outcome. And a lot of people early on, before this was, I was a bit more institutional in that now I've got a show at an institution. People didn't think it was serious. So I was like, Mike, he designs playgrounds. It was no reference to art. I think a lot of people really just saw it as not serious. And I sort of knew where it was going. I had the suspicion that it is interesting to expand how I saw artworks being interacted with, or even just the viability of art itself, or my version of it. Yeah, so it felt quite lonely in the early days. Like the first project that I did, which was only a playground in St. Peter's, 2020, I had even people that were quite close to me sort of say, are you really going to do a playground? You're an artist. That's a bit below you, isn't it? And yeah, so I felt a little lonely sort of going, well, no, I think there were some people that were like, nah, this is good, pursue it. So I did have that encouragement, but there is that uncertainty when you're not known in the art world or like particularly accepted as someone at the table. It is hard to go away from that. But I think it was worth it because now it has, I think, expanded people's ideas about what art can be. And I don't think it only needs to be this, because we need to keep the breadth of what art is. And it can be a big empty room with one thing in it. Like that's the artist's choice. But I think this project here has at least shown that artists can do much more than they're often allowed to. And it can actually work really well for institutions, because I guess the viability of institutions is also up for debate at the moment from a financial perspective. And they are finding increasing demands on them to, in some sense, pander to the public, but also meet their needs. But then there's also a responsibility to art proper to deliver something that gives you that like strong feeling or sense or surprise, or something that's not fully, comprehensible, that kind of amazing thing you get when you see a really good artwork, which doesn't happen very often, but that does need to be protected, because we're not trying to make selfie museums or adult daycare or none of that stuff, the 3D funhouse. For me, that's not art. But I have used, what I've been trying to do here is, I guess, work with people's natural instincts and curiosities to draw them here. So, or just their basic needs, which is like some people love saunaing. And so the idea that you can like do your washing and have a sauna while your kid's on a playground, that's like a draw card that's unrelated to art. I'm going for that. And then while you're there, you're in this environment, which is, I think it's, it's been an interesting road, and I'm glad that, it's hit a really good note for the public, I think.
So how did those first opportunities come about? How did you get those projects going?
I think the engineer card, like having worked in construction. So I studied engineering and then worked in marine construction for a number of years, and I would oscillate like between working for a year, saving, going back, self-funding projects, going back, working for a year, self-funding projects, which enabled me to work at a large scale, but also outside of institutional approval or the sort of regular power brokers that decide who gets to be seen. So there was a period where it's like, I was that kind of enthusiastic hobbyist in a lot of people's minds, a cute little engineer trying to be creative, which did allow me still to explore these ideas.
And build your portfolio.
Yeah, build the portfolio as I saw fit. And I never really worked with a gallery, but that also allowed me to not have to, I could let my instincts about where I wanted to head drive my next decision. And it wasn't so much based off what needed to sell or what people liked at the time. Because I did get in a little bit of a hole, or at least a box, where people are like, you're the big sticker guy. You do those paste ups. And that's all people saw in what I was doing, which is fine because it's all I had done at that point. But I guess I'd seen, no, this is heading somewhere that people don't often let you go, especially if it's new territory. So I think that was one thing that allowed me to be independent, is that I had a income stream separate from art. And then, I guess whatever happened in Colombia shifted my perspective on what I could do or say. I mean, I guess I grew up a little bit or something, felt a little bit more comfortable having my own voice or saying something, making something. And then just earning respect. And it wasn't inevitable that my projects would succeed. And so the first project, I demonstrated a whole bunch about what could actually work in public space. But then there were some things that either didn't work or I could learn from for future projects. And then I had to insist on the next project, the fences project. The council didn't want to touch me at the time because there was no precedent for allowing an artist to design a piece of infrastructure that sat within a very specific set of regulations around playground design standards. They wanted to do part of a playground next to my artwork. They wanted me to do a playful sculpture and they would do the playground. And I had to really put it to them that I'd quit the project if they didn't let me do the full thing, which was a huge amount of money for me at the time to turn down. But I had to say, no, the artwork is going to be the playground and that's all there will be. But then they said, yeah, all good, but we want nothing to do with it. So they didn't. So it was all on me to deliver, certify, sign off, hand over.
Wow.
But then it was hugely successful. It won Playground of the Year. It's been used as an example of inclusive play and working with heritage. But that was something I had to go alone on. I had to get a very specific set of insurance. I'm sure with like Lloyd's in London, because when you get into this design construct space where you're both the designer and the builder, it's a much more complicated insurance.
So you were basically like the artist, the fabricator, the engineer. Who signs off on that in the end?
Well, I work with a lot of well-qualified people. And I think that's one of my skills, is I know what I'm not good at and when to pull on other people's resources, or at least have them peer review. So the playgrounds certifiers that I work with are on the Australian Standards Committee. So they know they're up innovating and updating these standards. And the engineers that I work with, we go back and forth. You develop a sense of trust and you can work in quite a nimble manner when you have good relationships and people you trust.
How do you go about finding those people in the first place?
It's sort of been whoever blows in the door, but it's...
Have people actually come to you, been like, I want to work with you?
No, I think it was like I've always had to seek things out. Things are a little bit starting to come my way but it's pretty late. I've been doing this stuff for a while. I've had to almost beg people to work on my projects because it is so strange. I remember the guys that are working for me at the moment, when I first told them what I was planning on doing 2 years ago, it sounded insane. The kind of number of things that I said was going to happen in the next 2 years to grow up to the capacity to deliver a project like that. And that was very hard to sell that to people until, now there you see it, you're like, I can see what structure I would fit in. Mm-hmm. And then I think sometimes you just find a good energetic fit, like you have an instinct about whether you like the person, and you can tell very quickly whether they're capable or competent. And I think once you strike a good seam, you're like, I like this person. You find out who they like. and then it goes from there. Yeah, I guess a lot of it's on just interpersonal friendships and trust, and yeah.
Is there anything you ever wanted to do and you were told, absolutely not, you can't do that?
Yeah, a lot of things. Yeah, I mean, most of this project.
Really?
Yeah,
The gallery
absolutely.
was
Yeah.
pushing back?
Yeah, I mean, they're pushing back, but they also invited me to be here. Like, they did incredibly well taking the project on. And for an institution to work in this manner it's so challenging, because you do become vulnerable to the extent that you have to share risk with an artist. But that is you both have skin in the game. But when you also have that shared responsibility and exposure, it is also a great opportunity. It's the special sauce for a good project where people are both willing to go the whole way and they're willing to make themselves vulnerable enough. When people are in this mode of protection and wiping their hands of responsibility, which is really the normal legal framework for delivering anything in life, it's like minimum risk, minimum exposure, but it doesn't deliver a project like this. I had to be willing to go, I believe this needs to be done for a lot of reasons, to just basically show in a bureaucratic setting that people know how to live. People can interact with complex spaces in a way that's whimsical, fun, and responsible amount of, risk. But there's no financial incentive in most settings to bother to demonstrate that. It's incentivized not to. But I think it's interesting, and I also think it's very important for these new precedents to be demonstrated and for them to succeed, to allow other people to go down this route. But it's a huge risk to me, because I'm the one who's legally exposed. I'm the one who's financially exposed. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. Negligence isn't like sexy or interesting. And so in order to deliver a project like this, you have to take it really seriously, but you also have to go, what's the bigger thing that's happening here that we need to make sure happens, which is to allow people to have more freedom than they're currently given, or to be encouraged to interact with things in a way that's, less encumbered.
Your playgrounds and installations look pretty precarious. Like there's planks that look like they're randomly just put across a fence, or like a log balancing on top of a bunch of buckets. How do you design that tension while still keeping it safe for children?
Yeah, well, I guess there's a lot of installation art from the last 40 or 50 years, which is in that realm of things stacked on things or things balanced. This sort of precarity of, the composition of objects, common objects or art objects, in at least an artistic sense, is well within the kind of canon of things that artists do. And I think bringing that into a setting where people can hang off them or yank them or push them, it does shift it to an extent, because I often try and put a certain in the objects in the way that they're hung, that it's kind of believable that it would work like that, so long as you were being careful. So like a plank does bridge between two things. You could do that in your backyard and it would be fine. If someone wants to break the thing, of course they can take the plank off. Or if there was a log sitting on a bunch of buckets, you can imagine that would actually work. It's sort of believable. Like I think even the palm tree up the pole has fooled a lot of people, because people actually think that I just strapped a tree up there with truck straps, because there is an illusion. Like it was, there's 3D custom clamps that go around the tree with elastomeric resin. There's a hidden stainless steel tray with a drain underneath and all sorts of infrastructure hidden inside
and people
for the
would probably
illusion.
be mad, like, oh, the palm tree's going to die.
Yeah, people thought they would last a couple of weeks, which was what was the first insult. They're like, how dare you spend our money and give us like a piece of junk? So I think there is something in how I've built things that is slightly believable. It's like, that would work, that could work. It's maybe a little bit dodgy, but it's a pass. And I think a lot of that, it exists well within art and museums, like, I guess, abstract sculpture or whatever you call it. does look like you could just push it over.
A lot of it does, except the difference with your work is that people can touch it and interact with it, and children can climb all over it and not die.
Not die. Yeah, or not ruin
or
the
not
artwork.
ruin the artwork. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I haven't tried to be too deceptive because I think, I guess there's an extent where there is a certain amount of catch in the idea of, how's the thing balancing on the other thing when there's no... So I've tried to sort of avoid it being too like, oh my God, how's it balancing? But that precarity, I think, is just part of life. And we know that we can stack things, but also, at least in public space, there is a certain hardness to it. This concrete seat can't move. And then when you're in public space and everything can't be shifted because it's so bolted down, maybe it's just me, but I feel a certain sense of a lost agency where you feel like there's less possibility in life because everything's prescribed. Everything's got a design standard. Nothing really changes.
Interesting. Is that why you put a bunch of boulders on wheels?
Yeah, I think it's this idea that people can move something can shift. They could do this because they can they can see the movement in it. They can see the possibility of movement. Even if you can't, just the fact that someone has done that in public space, which alludes to movement, alludes to decay, it alludes to the fact that things do fall apart. That is just the reality of life. The Christchurch earthquake, 70% of the central city got eventually knocked down. So all these things that are like hard and, very
permanent,
prescribed and entrenched can actually change should we want to change the shape of things. And I think when the artworks that I've made have that sort of built into them, whereas it's like there's an acknowledgement of decay. And we love ruins. I don't know what intrigues us about that, but I think it connects with our own demise or our own aging, and we want to understand that and be close to it. And so when we see these things like the plaster coming off a wall or a fig tree growing out of brick or all of these things, we see a bit of beauty in it. But it also, I don't know, I think we're slightly comforted by the fact that things can fall apart a little bit. So I think that's part of what's led me to make things look a little bit more slapped together, backyard. Yeah.
Can you talk to me a bit about how you go about sourcing your materials? Because from what I hear, at least everything in here is somehow found objects or...
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, the starting point for this project was very early on. The curator, Justin, had really enjoyed the brightness of the buckets playground that I'd done. But when we brought some bright materials down here, it just seemed a little bit out of touch with the building itself. The tapestry of colours, almost like royal tones hidden behind the oil layers on the concrete. That, my instinct was like, we should bring in materials that have already had a life, much like this building. So they drop back into the colour palette that would draw out these like more subtle muted colours. And so the best way to do that was just aged materials that had a life already. And it sort of connected with, this is a 20th century relic. So we brought in other objects that had probably spent the best part of the 20th century bedding around Sydney or other parts of Australia. So that was sort of more of a colour tonal choice, but it also there's a certain warmth and energy in objects that have had a previous life, and they come with their little interesting quirks.
So where did you get all this? There's
Everywhere.
So much stuff.
People soon know that Mike's collecting junk, so they'll just drop it off.
Okay.
We reached out to Place New South Wales, which is the government agency that had a big collection of, I guess, historically significant materials or leftover infrastructure materials that they can't give away or sell. It's not quite heritage, but it's not sellable. So it's very hard to use, and it's very hard because you have to give it to a landscape architect to draw it up, put it in a tender brief, make a designer use it, give it back to a builder, and then they go, where's the palette gone? So there's all these materials that people can't use because it's just too hard. Even in a private setting, it's just too complicated to work with materials unless you really want to. And often the big problem is you have to actually collect them, do an inventory to see what you have, and then do your design based off that. So a lot of gum tree things I saw on the side of the road that would call up the person friends that I know, they said, oh, you should talk to such and such. Like, that's how we got the Opera House panels. I don't know if you realize, but there's a huge amount of precast panels. I don't even know if it's technically okay for me to have them, but I bought them off a farmer who had been stashing them in a property in like central New South Wales. I think they were removed maybe when they built the Opera Bar. The person who demolished it kept all these panels. There's a few, like they've got like 1968 written on the side of some of them.
Is that the floor?
Parts of it.
Part of it.
But yeah, really, like, how do you get there? I don't know. It came my way and I chased it down and made it fit into the project. So there's all sorts of materials that I've spotted along the way. It's not clever in the sense that, the conceptual artist might chase out a particular kind of flower from a thing or a seed from here that represents this. For me, it's more what is in my proximity, what are people offering, how can I best collect as much as possible for this show.
How long was the preparation period?
Well, one of the things I said to the gallery was that I would need a large warehouse space. I'd spend most of the money on rent, labor, logistics, because when you work with these complex, heavy things, you need space to store it, and you also need the equipment and the people to work with it. So I got a space in October 2024. So I had about 1 year from, I think, it was about a year from when I signed the contract to opening. So it was very short.
That is not long at all.
It's very short. But it also, more time, more money. So it also needed to be fast. We did start a conversation probably almost a year before that, but it was just a conversation. And I said this needs to be a stumble to the finish project, because building a effectively equivalent of a permanent infrastructure project inside a heritage building is prohibitively difficult and complex. And the only way it'll work is if I start now and I just go and we design it as we're going and we build it and we collect the materials as we're going and we innovate. And so the gallery was amazing in their ability to work with me on what did and would make any sensible bureaucrat terrified and very stressed about the level of uncertainty required, at least for this project.
So you didn't have really a clear vision of what would be eventually in here?
No, we had if you look at the early sketches and conversations or photos we shared, it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
But in terms of the exact materials, I extended myself a lot, building a sauna in a shed using found materials. So you got heat, you've got water, like hot water, you've got infrastructure plumbing. We have barbecue, so that has dealing with fumes and smoke that you have to clean the odor out of the air. There were so many new precedents. The fire design for this thing, safe fire egress, disability access. The most challenging parts of the project are not obvious at all, even building the floor up. So
that's insane.
Yeah. Now that we've done it, you would do the project in a different way in the future. It still is the smartest way to do it. But if we did it again, there would be a much less stressful way of coming to it. But again, back then, this is much more than the gallery thought they were initially getting.
Right.
So, but that's because no one would have trusted me to
deliver on that much.
Yeah. Yeah. And nor should they, because it hadn't been done before. So there's this risk that I think it's very interesting that the institution took. I also say risk. I also think it's a safe, smart bet, because I have delivered well before. But also, they were vulnerable to an extent in that it's not locked in, it's not guaranteed, it's not AAA rated security.
Yeah, and you're not showing something you already have sitting in
Yeah,
storage.
exactly. They wanted a playground. We did the playground arguably in the last week or two of the project. That was almost done in our sleep. All the hard parts was working with getting 250 amp 3-phase and distributed under the floor, smoke baffles, because it becomes a separate fire compartment under the floor because we're raising the floor. But we needed to raise the floor so that water could drain. So we built it like a tanked, basically swimming pool in the wet zone. So all the water would run down, drained by gravity into a tank, and then we pump it out. So we pumped water in, pump water out. all of that stuff that's hidden was incredibly complex to build. And even because we had to build a floor with the fire compartments and all the infrastructure underneath, and then bring in the forklifts with the heavy objects and the concrete and the bricks. And the floor had to be temporarily strong enough to support these fully loaded forklifts. So the complexity and we only had, I think it was 8 or 9 weeks from start to opening.
Damn.
So it's anyway, huge credit to the gallery for taking it on, because it was it was a hard one.
Do you have any stories of when something wasn't working? Logistical challenges?
Oh, I mean, I guess when a big team is under so much pressure to deliver so much for so little, I think we all stop working to an extent. You sort of have a certain amount of overload. But I mean, one thing that's constantly been overworked is the bucket off the sauna. That was done as my version of wanting to do like an ice bath, but not make it too like Bondi bro. So I thought the chilled water in a bucket would be a nice way of doing it, but I didn't think that it would become
It's like the main attraction.
The main attraction
for the children.
And so that has gotten an absolute thrashing. So there's been a lot of on the maintenance chat, a lot of you need to fix the bucket ASAP because everyone needs it and wants it. But no, look, I knew this project would work. When the gallery first approached me, I didn't for a second, even though it was well outside of, a huge privilege for an artist to get offered a project at this scale. But I didn't have imposter syndrome, like it wasn't for me. This was the right time for this project. I think even in 2 years' time, it wouldn't have been right. It was like I had the energy. I knew what needed to be done. And yeah, but that we're all as a team still reeling from everything that we did and trying to make sense of it all and how it fits in. Yeah.
So do you get regular call outs for maintenance, or how does this side of it work?
We hadn't anticipated it to be such a huge success in terms of the number of visitors and how long people stay for. I think the gallery initially were unsure whether people would actually know how to interact with anything. They were like, surely people aren't going to actually come and use the sauna or bring food. And I was like, you just wait. Especially sauna people, they're crazy. They'll be here every day.
I've been in there.
Yeah. And I think because they've blown the record visitor numbers by such. I think a blockbuster shows in the 150 to 170,000 in 3 months. That's the big time ones. And in that same period, we've had 210, 220,000
wow.
or something like that.
That's huge.
Including a week or two ago, they had about 6,000 through, which is the most they've ever had in this tank ever since the building opened. And that was just on a Friday. And with very few invigilators as well, mediating the interactions, which is what I said to them at the start. I was like, one of the big costs that kills projects is the cost to the labor required to manage people's interactions with it, which is huge. And it's one of the big problems with these projects is how do you manage the people, especially if you let them go. So I just said, let's build it like a public park, and council doesn't have to come down and check how you're cooking your steaks or where you're sitting. Parks work because it's public space, and it's been the piazza. It can do a lot of things all at once. You just need to come and blow the leaves away and just some basic maintenance. And so we use that approach. I was like, let's use the same design principles that are well accepted in Australia about safe public space design. We use the playground code for the play area. We use the standard Australian quintessential electric public barbecue.
Yeah.
All these things people already know. So you're leveraging people's own experiences and ways of living to make it easy for everyone else. You sort of work with these. I just got commercial washing machines. I got the Speed Queen, everything that people already know. And that allows to shush people or bother them to an extent. I mean, there's a little bit that needs to be done, but we're just managing. So yes, there are call outs. There has been small fixes, but in a 2,500 square meter space that's been fully utilized, it's actually takes quite a bit of time to keep up with those small jobs when you're trying to do other things. Yeah.
So you're here quite regularly then?
Yeah, I try and not be, but it's just inevitably, you want for the show to be a success. I really hate things that don't work. Yeah, that's why I've only done very static things in the past, because they very rarely break. And as soon as you do things that move, or there's a button or something twists,
the bucket.
Yeah, then they can break down. And so it's been, even though we've been massively burnt out and it's not something we get paid to do, I see it as my responsibility to make sure the thing works as best possible, because it does become a new precedent and it's important to me. Yeah.
What is going to happen to all the stuff when this show is over?
Oh, well, we're working on that. Everything was built in a way, and I'm not sure if this is obvious. I was like, all of the things that you see in the park should be outdoor materials, and you'll get a strange feeling that you're outside.
Actually, yeah. And the way you've done the lighting, I forget that we're underground and this isn't daylight. The color of the light is just the right tone.
Yeah. Well, there's some very subtle, like very important, I think, master strokes that we did first up, which is I wanted bright light with no column shadows, and I wanted like even skin tones, because I think no one's seen this space. And it's the only way of lighting the columns and the walls to see them in their beauty. But also the sound curtain that we wrapped around the two walls. And now that is doing, in terms of making it a pleasant sensory experience, that's doing 80% of the work.
Wow.
If that was there, this place would be awful.
I was
Absolutely
wondering what
awful.
the hell that was for.
Yeah, it's a very, very effective Mike way of doing a giant mural that's site-specific, but it is making it so much more comfortable. Before we put up that curtain, when we started install, one angle grinder was so deafening down in the space that you couldn't work down there. As soon as we got the curtain up, it changed everything. And actually, so we did work with an acoustics engineer to lay things out to bring the reverb right down to like a good level for live music. To your question of where it's going to go, I've used outdoor materials because they can be stored outside afterwards. And so everything was built in a way that it can do its life outside later, because all these things can go into a park. So the concrete slabs, I've used glass reinforcing. So it's this kind of rarely used but amazing kind of reinforcing, like steel, but it doesn't rust. So those kind of crazy slab paintings on the floor can be lifted up and re-put in public space permanently, and they will last. All of the fake columns that I made, but they're from real marine grade concrete with the same, so they can be incorporated into public sculpture. All of the structures have been built effectively to code, waterproof, flashed, insulated. They got their own distribution boards, so you just have to plug power in. So all of the structures fit on a truck in the freight elevator and can go to another place. And the palm trees, obviously, they'll find their way into other artworks. And yeah, I mean, I guess if people are going to put so much effort and love into this, including me, then it should have a life. It's the responsible thing for it to have another life. And also financially, that's the only viable way. You create like this much junk. It's costly to throw it out. It's also so wasteful, just on so many levels. And yeah, just dull. I mean, I think the idea of all this waste for a short-lived experience is just, it's a bit awful. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons we've done that, and it was very difficult to do that. And I think a lot of people were like, why are you spending so much effort on the stuff that won't, like, say, there's no reason to make this building waterproof, right? Or there's so many things that weren't necessary at the time, but you know who's going to be lumped with this after the show gets deinstalled? Me.
Yeah.
And who's going to not want to buy it if it's just a big, like, liability? Anyone else. So, you're just thinking ahead to go, what are we trying to do here? And what could it be? And if you build it with this redundancy, like a lot of the structures that we build, you just build them extra tough. So you don't have to worry about how many kgs the drunk person is that's interacting. You just, and I think I learned that in marine construction is there's like typical engineering loading. You go to the ocean doesn't care. So you just make it the easiest, toughest way. And then often that allows you to just let people live. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I would like to see it rehomed in sections.
Let's actually talk about that, the financial aspect. I'm imagining most of your projects are paid through commission fees, artist fees. Do you have another commercial side where you're selling stuff or you're making maybe smaller things that you can sell?
Yeah, well, that's the year of the horse for me, is like sell, 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 because it hasn't been, especially when you build up to a scale where you have the infrastructure and the people and the team to do this, the overheads are like huge. So, it's going to be a very intense year for me, incredibly stressful. Well, actually, as soon as the show opened, it became even more stressful. But the financial viability is the focus this year. So we're doing everything from merch that we'll hopefully try and sell internationally. Because I think this thing is like, you want to have a free park like this, it's all good and well, but who's going to pay for it? And like philanthropy only can go so far. And people also in philanthropy want to see what else you're doing to make this happen that doesn't involve them and your handout. So, government funding is one bit. I mean, I went in a lot personally. I made a bunch of money off probably the first profit I'd made on a project recently that opens shortly. And all of that I put in, huge loan, a huge amount of debt, and a huge amount of money still owed to people that I'm trying to figure out how to. So it was hugely like above and beyond.
So you're saying that the budget that the gallery had for this wasn't enough, basically. You went over budget and you put in your own money.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how much I should say in this setting, other than the realities of delivering a project like this is unsurprising. We all wanted this. There's only so much a gallery can agree to, given their fiscal responsibilities to a lot of different people, including the public. And also, commissioning a person who hadn't proven themselves in this setting at this scale. So I put my hand up for being a part of the challenges and the ongoing fallout of doing something at this scale. But what I'm focusing on this year is that we always need to do more to find ways to make these projects sustainable. And so that for me will be, and has been, I did a sellout show with Michael Led at Sydney Contemporary of smaller sculptures. We are doing merch. I'll be selling smaller kind of repeated elements from the artwork to put on their farm property.
Okay.
There'll be overseas projects, public art commissions, but also it's just trying to find ways that are already out there, like councils are commissioning playground projects, but their commissioning process doesn't generally allow for this kind of, or my contribution.
Would you ever redo something like this and then just charge entry fees?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any problem with charging an entry fee. I mean, you go to some of those like Bounce or one of those, take your kids to the trampoline place or the team labs or whatever. Like, people don't mind if someone's going to look after their kids, they don't mind paying. I really don't think this particular project was always going to be free, which is part of its charm too, because people have come here because it is free. And I think there's something really special about that. But there is a lot of other opportunities that I guess I wasn't across because I was doing already so many things all at once, where there is an opportunity for, say, merch to be a big part of it, or people to connect with the artwork in a way that's relatively inexpensive, but very helpful.
So where are you selling this merch? Where can people find?
We're working on a website at the moment. There is a little merch shop and a vending machine at the entrance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's been huge interest even at that thing. It's more about what is the responsible way of making sure you can continue with your art practice without diluting it or taking the energy out of it. And I guess I've been very careful to not do that too soon. Now I feel like I'm at a good point where I can do something that is like still genuine, but also accessible. And that's a part of it. And, there could be a cafe and bar connected to a project like this that can generate income, because these projects, I mean, the sauna, like I go to a place regularly, it costs $60 and I go for 40 minutes and it's not as good as this. There are ways that this is viable, but until you've delivered the project, people can't see its viability. Now we can,
This
I guess,
is like proof of concept.
yeah, this is proof of concept to go, look, you don't need to have a sort of vacuous, populist art exhibition in a museum that sells tickets, but not very good art in order to keep a museum open. There are actually other funding avenues that also may not require ticketing. You can do the aspects that are rented So I think it's something that I am learning about and certainly not across. And it is the next frontier because it's not sustainable. What this project put so much pressure on so many people and my team, and I feel very responsible to never go through that again in that way. I mean, we all like kind of enjoyed just how intense and special, but burnout is not a sustainable business model, and it's not good for health, and it's not good for generating something that has generates lasting joy and presence. But sometimes you have to go there before you can do the other version of it. And a big part of it will be figuring out other financial mechanisms to help make the project happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting to me now, because now I see that it's responsible to do that, because then you can have a certain level of independence from who's funding your thing and whatever their ideology is. You don't have to sign up for it because you've taken a bit of your power back in finding innovative ways to make it happen.
Mm.
I think that's good for artists, because artists are in this place at the moment where often they are being cut out for whatever their views are. And we have to reform ways that we can. Yeah. Also, I just think it's responsible. I think it's interesting to try and find other ways to keep going that you haven't thought of. And
find diverse sources of income.
Yeah. I mean, for me, something like I had an engineering job that gave me independence for so long. Now I'm at a scale where I can't earn enough wages to keep the operation going, so that's not viable anymore. But we are doing structural steel for the building industry. Like, I'm just whatever way I can get money at the moment.
So in your studio, you're actually like providing materials for buildings.
Yeah, we're not making artworks. I'm just doing structural steel and architectural doors and windows just to keep the lights on or keep some cash flow coming.
Right.
Yeah, it's desperate times, but you got to do whatever you can. But in doing that, you learn a lot about stuff too. You can make connections in industry. You learn about how people make things and realize how much you don't know, how to simplify the logistics of building things. So, yeah, I think one of the reasons I think I was able to deliver this project, I mean, it's a monstrous thing to hold in your head, and all of the uncertainty of all the people who have never done this before, never seen it before. I worked on a marine construction project that I got called in because I was broke and needed some cash to do a dredging project in Port Kembla, just down near Wollongong. And I did 6 months working for this big company and learned so much from how this family-owned business operated, how they treated people, but also just the physical scale of moving like 1 million cubic meters from one side of the harbour to the other. Just seeing the physical delivery of such a big scale project and being a significant part of that, and then being invited to do something like this. A younger version of me couldn't have done it, but I think being outside of the arts, you can learn a lot about your capacity and what's possible. And I think we get beaten down a lot by like what we can and can't do, or people tell us we can and can't do. And for me, that thing of needing money and working outside of the arts was hugely generative to very specifically allowing me to deliver this project, including some of the people who worked on that did help me here. So, yeah.
Yeah. A quick intermission to thank everyone who has filled out our listener survey so far. Your feedback has been really helpful. And if you haven't done it yet, I would love to hear from you. It only takes a few minutes. It's anonymous, and the link is in the show notes. Or you can also leave me a voice message at speakpipe.com/installationartpodcast. Your input is really valuable, and it will help shape the future of this podcast. Now, let's get back to the conversation. I wanted to ask you about that Sydney Contemporary Geopet
the Geopets,
thing.
yes.
I thought it was a very interesting kind of intervention, very unusual at the art fair. Was it a marketing stunt or was it real? Like the fact that it sold out at the last day, was that a art world urban legend or
No, it's sold out. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That
yeah.
is very cool.
Look, I think there was a point during the fair where we were all like, but it was the only interesting project I had in me at that time. And Michael, who I worked with, had seen my Crocs project that I'd done a number of years earlier, where I carved these like chainsaw things and I sold them, and the price went up during the art fair.
Yeah, every day it went up by 100.
Yeah, but they were sort of affordable projects because art is expensive because artists spend a lot of time on it. But also at those art fairs, like you can't buy an artwork for under $5,000, and who has a lot of people don't have $5,000. So I was like, and also I hoped one day that I would be working at a scale where people are like, oh, I got this thing back then when it was $650, but also just the fun of like people carrying these things through the fair, just to like kind of muck with things a little bit. So yeah, there was a performative.
For the listeners, they were basically like brick pets.
Yeah, brick pets. Yeah. Yeah, like they were actually these precious bits of vitrified brick from a coke works, which is where they make coke and coal. So it's like 100-year-old brick that had been demolished by a developer, and he's since crushed all the materials. But I rescued a bunch of these bricks, which I thought they just look like contemporary ceramic, conceptual, and then just put the gemstones glued to them. But I think that thing of people being able to grab an artwork with their hands, kind of like a grocery in an art fair, is interesting too. And it, it was priced by the kg, so you'd take it along and weigh it. And again, it was still a serious artwork that I resolved it as a serious sculpture. But yeah, I thought it was interesting to, people are bored. They're sick of the same thing. And like, no one needed to see any more paintings from me, that's for sure. I think sometimes in those environments, you need relief from, something that just feels very samey.
Yeah, no, it was very refreshing and very different.
Yeah. A lot of people would come by and be like, oh, wow, I needed this. Yeah, and we needed the money. So it's a great way to connect with people who are interested in your work, but how do you buy a whole playground or something? And me wanting to wait long enough that I could make something that was interesting enough and serious enough that, people are like happy with what they've got, their little brick friend.
Yeah, I'm sure they're only going up in value now.
Yeah, well, that's what I think. Also, like, you want people to feel like there's an upside. And I hope that. Anyone who got stuff ages ago, I'm working on it. Maybe it'll be more valuable one day. Or at least it's priced at a point where you're like, oh, well, it's not that much. Yeah.
Can you think of a particularly rewarding or transformative moment or experience you've had in your life as an artist?
Oh. Well, there was a slightly angsty period I had when I first was shifting from engineering to arts, that I was in Christchurch with my brother, and we would be in our studio and sort of wandering around in our pajamas and midweek bare feet listening to folk music and probably drinking whiskey or something. I don't know. Just, it's funny to look back on that kind of very curious and a lot of existential angst driving this pursuit of creativity, and it's lovely to feel like you've come out of that a bit. But the earthquake, I think, was a big moment for me where I was in my mid-20s and I'd put a lot of my energy and time and money into starting to become an artist. And then when the earthquake hit and I was outside the building, my brother had come out, and going across this realization that I may never ever go back, and potentially had lost everything I'd ever owned. So you're sort of left with, I was actually in bare feet at the time, in the middle of this city half broken down. And I remember looking up at the building and going, is it worth keeping going with this thing? Should I just cut my... And then I just had a feeling at the time, I was like, no, I think that it's worth continuing. So I think that was a moment where I was like, I think I'll keep pursuing this because I think I can offer something, or at least I might find fulfillment in it.
Mm.
Yeah, I think going to New York not going to art school until my 30s was good, because over there you're sort of around the power brokers of the art world. So it demystifies gets rid of any allure of what you're missing out on, or some people are more happy that you're somehow missing out over here. But it was great to feel like you can be wherever and know all the buttons you're pressing. Because I think when you do understand the broader art language and what's happening around the world, you can be a bit more careful about, when you're treading on a toe or when you're signaling the wrong thing that you don't intend to. So I think you can not realize how bad your work is or the context that it's sitting in. So I think that was a very helpful thing, but it was also helpful to leave.
You didn't want to stay in New York?
I wasn't any use there. I was just hanging around hoping something would happen. And there's a lot of people hanging around there waiting for a break. Rick Tirawani, who I worked for a while, he said, Mike, no one's looking for a New Zealand artist here. You should go back to where you came from and do something interesting. And it was actually good advice because I have started making much more interesting work here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a lot happier as a result, I think.
So you're based in Sydney now? And
yep.
Do you still consider yourself a New Zealand artist, or are you more like a hybrid Australian New Zealander?
I might apply for a passport here, but no, I mean, a New Zealand artist, I think that's...
Because Australians will claim you, I'm sure.
That's
now.
fine. I'm very lucky and happy to be here. For me, it's a very interesting place to be because there is a lot of public space being built. And while it is a very litigious environment and risk cautious, surprisingly, there is a huge appetite for pushing boundaries. And I think a project like this is a kind of world first project. There has been a number of major institutional playground exhibitions over the last 50, 60 years, and none of them have actually worked in the sense that they often get shut down because someone gets hurt.
Right.
And we're not out of the woods yet, but we have been very careful about thinking about exactly how it's used. And, you're not infallible, and you show negligence, it can change how the whole show is perceived.
Is there anything you've had to come back and modify because of that?
Not really. I mean, there's always things that you try and anticipate and you're like, I think I could do that better. Yeah, no, I've learned a lot through all the previous projects, just keeping an eye on things. But yeah, it's still something you think about because I really care about how it is for people. But at the same time, you sort of have this dual responsibility to push the boundaries, but also to be really responsible. And I'm the one who has to wake up in the middle of the night and just, did I do that? Or is that? And you have to grapple with it because, that will be the legacy of the work. There's plenty of like arrogant male sculptures over the years that have done big things and eventually have hurt someone. And it's, there is a risk in doing physical things in public space around people, especially when they have an element of perceived precarity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a constant dialogue. It's a constant innovation and review that I have to think about. And I'm responsible for.
There's a question regarding, because we've talked a lot about public art on this podcast, and there's a question I'm always curious about when it comes to permanent installations in the public space. Do you think there should be something in the contract about the artist's ability to review it, let's say in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, and see if it's still relevant to that space, or if it's still, I don't know, if it's still fulfilling its purpose, or maybe not hurting your reputation as an artist even, and like maybe be able to say, no, it's done now, I have to take it down.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that would be an interesting thing to introduce. I mean, for me, all the past projects that I've done, there has been a kind of an unspoken, people want the project to succeed and be relevant often. There's not many people that want to go, especially if it's starting to hit a bad note, for it to be like, no, this is the artwork, it must be maintained. But I think that topic's always up for debate. Sometimes you do need to update things or change things. It's often more towards the owner or the operator's license where they can change it should there be safety concerns or whatever concerns. Yeah.
Do you actually have something about that in your contract? Like, I've recently spoken to a public artist who said that in his contracts, if they change something about his work, they have to take his name off it because he doesn't represent
Yeah, something to
him
that
anymore?
effect, that you can't go against the moral rights of the artwork itself. That is often owned by the artist but licensed to the owner. And then generally the way that I negotiate the clauses, it's around reasonable requests and me reasonably cooperating with their requests. Because I think that's just like anything in life. It's a negotiation. It's a shared responsibility. And two parties have to meet at a good outcome. So it is an important thing. I've said no to plenty of projects that didn't have good rules in that regard. I said no to a lot of projects because...
Is that because of the language around it?
Yes, because the artwork didn't have enough rights to defend itself from, say a council worker decides he wants to change the colour of the thing or take certain parts out. There was a big debate over the Wollongong project because council, for whatever reason, just took real issue with the palm tree up the pole and wanted to remove that part of it. And I was like, yeah, you can get rid of the artwork, but just you have to take the whole thing out and look forward to seeing the bill that someone gives you to remove it. And also you're removing a big public asset and destroying it. So yeah, that is a big part. It's more, I never want to hold it over someone that they have to keep it, but they don't get to modify it.
Mm.
I think that's the thing, is it's like the show here. I only want the show to be here for as long as the public or the institution want it here. But at the same time, you have to sort of respect its kind of what it is while it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that is a big part of it. And I think it's very important for artists to fight for it. And a lot of organizations will gaslight or force you into the environment where you sign something you're not quite comfortable with because you need the money or you're not quite sure what the right way to do things is. But the reason it's very important to fight for is these people pass through institutions, they come and go. And you might be mid-project and you get someone else on board who just decides that they don't like the artwork, they don't like the shape and they want to modify it. And then you end up in this awful experience and you can end up making a giant bad artwork, and there's nothing worse than a giant bad thing that stays there forever. It's just awful. And so I think it's important for an artist to have a bit of power and a bit of skin in the game where they're backed up by a clause that is not about the whim of someone in a bureaucratic organization, because they might be passing through for whatever reason. They've got a marriage breakup or there's just so many personal things that come into these bureaucratic interactions. And it's really helpful to have a good, strong legal grounding to at least defend the essence of the artwork.
Are you fluent in that language, or do you employ a lawyer to look over all your contracts?
Yeah, I always get lawyers to check through things. I've just learned a lot along the way. Very much learn as you go. And it's been very hard, but artists have to get savvy with all of these things. I mean, insurance has been one of the biggest challenges.
Really?
Yeah, huge. I'd be one of, if not the only artist with insurance that covers play specifically from a building and design perspective. I know some have insurance through institutions, but they're not far-reaching coverage. And even play industry companies struggle to get coverage.
Wow.
And they're just as builders or as designers, not both. So these types of things are the make or break. I think I'm at an okay point now, but you're only 1 year away from not being able to continue. Because if you can't get coverage, you can't operate. No one will work with you. And it's not trivial to get coverage. We're continually going to be at the whim of, it's not often personal either. It's just the underwriters decide they're going to not cover a certain risk profile because whatever has happened in the building industry, unrelated to play, but they're like, we need to shore up our ledger. So we're just going to cut this stuff. They're not worried about whether the state's latest underground park project is going to go ahead or not. So, yeah.
This kind of stuff must be a bit easier in New Zealand, though.
No, not necessarily. Things are pretty... I mean, there's certainly less money over there and people... Yeah, you'd be surprised.
Well, you can't sue someone for...
You can't sue someone. Yes, that's true. It doesn't mean that the insurance... Yeah. It's a very interesting topic, at least in the Commonwealth legal framework. As far as I understand it, liability cases are seen by a judge rather than a jury, and it's often capped. I believe it is capped, at least in the Commonwealth framework. And the judge in this framework can weigh up the greater good, and it can be viewed in the context of what the loss to society would be if something like this isn't allowed to go ahead, or the precedent that it will set, what it will mean. So say, for example, an interesting playground that meets the broad developmental needs of the public and increases resilience across a country, sets new precedents for better public space and better play opportunities. If you were to stop this for this particular case, for this particular person, what is the loss to society? I believe that, at least in this legal framework, that's part of the... Often it doesn't get to that. Insurance companies just do a payout and whatever, but it is part of the framework. And in the US, I believe it is liability cases. And, there's benefits to it to stop big corporations from taking advantage of their opportunities and power, can have unlimited damages to someone. So for someone like me, that's too scary, especially if a bully comes over and just goes, for whatever reason, goes, I'm going to ruin you. Yeah, they really can. And is it worth it? I don't know. Not for me at this point. But I guess there'll be a time when I've seen enough precedences of the success and intention. And a lot of it's just to do with being non-negligent.
Yeah.
Like the biggest thing that I try and do is I want to have thought through everything and made conscious decisions about why I did things. What are the calculations for how this is attached? What's the structural principle? What's its maintenance schedule? How will people interact with it? And basically demonstrating that it has been thought through and it meets these codes or these standards, or a hybrid. Like the project I'm doing at the fish markets, it's not a playground in the sense of it doesn't fully comply to the playground code. It's also not coded playground. There's no swing, no slide. It's just chunks of metal and palm trees, but it is immersive. But for that one, I was like, this is a sculpture park that is going to draw on the parkour code, the playground code, general principles of public space design that landscape architects use. So it's bringing together all these different codes and design principles that are responsible public space, but in particular for this, to be non-negligent in the way that we deliver it. And that's really interesting to me, to do something that sits outside of, say, playground proper.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also something that I'm risking doing because most people just go, well, you take the more conservative of the risk assessing tools, which would be the playground standards. So everything has to have at least 1.5 meters of rubber or mulch around it. And then often when artworks, sculptures could be climbed, you just see this kind of weird mulch patch around the edge. It just doesn't feel like that's how the artwork was intended, but it's been beaten by this playground standard.
Even like a regular old public art sculpture, if it has the possibility to be climbed on, it has to have that perimeter around it?
Well, has to is the question, because it's to do with who's owning and operating it. And often councils that either inexperienced or they have a risk manager that has a certain way of viewing public space, it's up to them to decide what their risk exposure is. And they have to be able to basically stand up and say what their approach is. And a lot of people are too busy. They want to keep their job. They're not interested in like breaking any records. So they go, well, we have this is an easy one. Just make it past the playground code, then we're covered.
Yeah.
They're not worried about like, I often bring up the example that gym equipment in Australia is kind of a little bit like a playground, but I don't know if you know how much the rubber that they put down in playgrounds costs. It's like prohibitively expensive.
I wouldn't know.
For a small gym area, it might be 80 or 100K of rubber, and it's costs a lot to maintain. And so councils are like, we can't afford the rubber, so they don't put the gym equipment in. So then you think about what the loss is to society to not have these little bits of chin-up bar and whatever.
Right.
Because they can't assess the risk of, they can't definitely define it's absolutely not a playground. So they just go, we'll just do the easy thing, call it a playground, make it all spaced out. It doesn't need to be spaced out, but then everything has to be at least 1.5 meters from it. Then suddenly the rubber area is increased. You're using up more grassland from the park, and you're kind of like, why is it this shape? And it's because, we're not intelligent, or we're not sophisticated, or we don't have enough precedences about responsible management of public space in relationship to defining which risk category it sits in, or is it a hybrid one that is also acceptable? And art doesn't fit in that. We don't have that yet, because every council has a different way of viewing it. Like, in this project, the fish markets is commissioned by Infrastructure New South Wales, and it's managed by Place, which is Place New South Wales, like another state government level organisation. They've been great because they understand what's at stake, but they understand what it can help deliver for the public. And yeah, it takes organizations to go through this new territory, which is good for art because often how an artwork lands on the ground is maybe the most important part, like the plinth or whatever it is, because often they land horribly.
Right. I've never even thought about it, but that is a very interesting point.
It's for me, it's one of the biggest things about how it sits, what's it sitting on or around, and does that make sense in the context of the artwork?
Mm-hmm.
So the Rocks on Wheels was a very intentional kind of silly, like Home Depot or Bunnings plinths, art handler plinths. But I think that this risk assessing rubber or mulch around the thing is a horrible conundrum, not to mention the cost. But it is an important thing I don't think artists should be able to build whatever they want without thinking about how children might use it or how people might climb it. There is a need for designers and artists to be responsible for how it might be used. But it's also, I don't think it's right that there be these kind of, I think it's lazy box ticking definitions, code compliance. I don't think it's a good use of public resources because ultimately it's the public that's paying for these bit of rubber around the edge of something that doesn't need it. Like the public complain about their money being misspent. You're not often protecting a child by putting this, there's other ways to do it. There's certainly plenty of things in nature, rocks or trees or climbing a tree. Like there's no rubber around a tree. So there's certainly precedents within nature or the general built environment where we can perfectly navigate moving our bodies in a way when there is hard ground underneath. It's just thinking it through, and it's it's something that's important for how an artwork is read.
Great points. What's a hard truth you have had to learn as an artist?
Hard truth. Oh, many. I mean, it felt like a hard truth to stomach with my early on projects where the public felt really alienated by these pretentious projects that they didn't understand. It was more just us being a bit young and insecure that it's okay to explain a project rather than just going, it's just the work. To give ways into an artwork, to give people something so that they can unpack it for themselves, which I guess as a younger artist, I was like, oh, that's giving too much away, or it should be good enough that you don't have to explain it. So I've learned that it's very helpful to give people ways in because everyone has a different way into understanding an artwork. I guess another hard truth I'm learning or contending with is just the financial viability of arts, particularly at the scale where you can't just expect for things to happen on their own and you have to pretty much brute force it. You have to take responsibility to find viable financial ways to pull these things off because however something might have been funded once might not be there again, and it might not be responsible for it to be there again because there's other avenues that you haven't explored. So I think it's a hard thing that I'm going to learn this year more of.
Yeah, that's a big one. What advice would you give an artist who's just starting out in installation or in public art?
I think specifically it is challenging in the installation setting because you're contending with so many different things, with scale, with weight, with the interaction aspect, funding, storage, using so many different crafts and skills and expertise. It really can be a long road and a lonely one that it does expand and get better, but it is a long road. And I think I didn't need to be successful quickly, or like it was a rewarding enough journey, the little steps. And I mean, it's surprising that I'm doing a project of this scale. At this point, I thought this wouldn't come from much later on in my career, if at all. I think that's the thing of it doesn't need to happen immediately, and often things that happen quickly are great anyway, or not lasting. I've also been determined, just trusting my instincts about what, say for example with the playground part, just trusting my instincts when people said, I don't think that's serious, you shouldn't be going down that road. Just to go, you know what, I think this is right for me to pursue, even if it's not. Just that kind of go it alone a little bit, if you suspect it's in you.
So has it gotten better? Like, do you feel like you belong in the art world now?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably it was silly for me to think I didn't because, art's not that snobby. I thought it was snobby until you sort of get a little bit further in. You realize everyone's just trying to get by, and it is great to have this high level of scrutiny and questioning and exploring things and not liking things and calling people out for their. So yeah, I am, but also like, who cares? Because my own silly insecurities are not that interesting anyway. Yeah, it is interesting though how things can shift when there's, again, people finding a way in. So for example, here, it wasn't until Justin had physically been to the South Bank Rocks on Wheels project. He'd seen photos of it, but I think the physical experience of being there and the energy of the people there really surprised him. And sometimes people just won't have a way into your things until a certain point, and then it became art. Even City of Melbourne, they didn't even want to call it an artwork. Like they just were like, this is a playground. They didn't even really want to acknowledge my involvement, weirdly. And then now it's a playground and an artwork. So I think sometimes you just have to be patient with people because,
Right.
and it doesn't need to be understood fully. You don't even understand it fully yourself, I think. For me, I just have been following my nose, and I feel like I only know like a little bit around the corner, but not much further. But that's been enough for me just to keep going with what you have. It's often not much more than that, though.
Has your production kept up with your ideas?
Ooh, it depends who you ask. Yeah, I'm a time optimist.
Right. Okay.
And
I
a
see.
resource optimist. But look, I'm not wondering what my next great big thing is. Like, this has been enough for me. I have to keep going because I have to find ways to make things viable. So yeah, I think this was a lot, this show. And
It's
yeah.
Mammoth.
Yeah, it's Mammoth. And I have no interest in going bigger or something.
So you're not going to try to top this?
If I do, it's not because it's like a burning desire to. I think it might be the responsible thing to do at some point, but it certainly won't be delivered in a manner that is any form similar. It doesn't interest me at all to operate like that again.
Operate like what? How do you mean?
Well, this is like a career-defining project, but it's also like a kind of institutional, groundbreaking project in terms of what it does. And when you do those kinds of projects, it's a kind of an underdog project where you have to really go above and beyond and go beyond the brief and over-deliver. But that's not the best thing to do all the time. It's a one-off. Now that it's been demonstrated, you could get enough resource because it does have so much appeal that you can make a business model around different funding mechanisms to make this sustainable, to find the money to do it because it'll be paid back in other ways. That's why. I don't feel like I need to prove anything now. I've done enough proving. Now it's like, let's make it sustainable based on the appeal of what has been done. So I've done that stretch work. I've made the brochure.
So what's coming up for you now?
Now I have to work on sales.
Sales.
Yeah, sales. Sell. That's the, yeah. But I think, as soon as you owe people money, a lot of small people money, you have every responsibility to like do everything within your power to make sure they get what's theirs, And so, yeah, it's a huge challenge, but also it's interesting for that reason because also when you are paying people, that gives them independence in a way if they're enjoying their work. So it's kind of really in the mix at the moment.
So you mentioned the fish market. You're working on that?
Yeah, the big public project out the front that opens on Monday.
Oh, already?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, we snuck that in this year
So
as well.
that's a permanent installation as well?
Yeah.
Cool.
Huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
People can go and check it out.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anything else in the works?
Yeah, every avenue. I'd love to do like a playground catalog to make editions of smaller bits of public art playground that can be put within a tender package. So like a landscape architect can specify a Mike Hewson unit. Just turns out to be a very big unit. It's very custom because I'd make it, but it's also repeatable in a way that works. It's just a way of kind of bypassing the difficult commissioning process and using the existing mechanisms of funding or of delivering public projects.
So you would make like 5 options of a mini playground that
something like that. Yeah.
commissioners can like insert into their park or something.
And that way, when they put it in the contract documents of this or similar, because they always have to say or similar so it doesn't end up becoming a monopoly. But no builder's going to do an or similar. So, of course, they...
Yeah.
Good luck. Good luck to them. If they want to do it, well, go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Where can people find out more about you, find your work, maybe buy something?
Yeah, well, we're working on the buy something, bit slow off the mark with that one, but I have a website that has past work on it. Doesn't actually have documentation yet of this show because we've been so swamped trying to recover from it. But there'll be even furniture in the merch website.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there'll be
Interesting.
the whole realm of whatever we can make. But
so
yes,
this is all like made in your studio kind of stuff.
Yeah. There'll be some stuff that's made overseas straight to buyer, but most of the stuff that's art.
Sweet.
From the studio. Yeah. Again, it's just like people, if you can provide something at a price point that they're already going at and something that they need in their house that's also interesting as a sculpture. Yeah, it's cool. Like the furniture in here, like all of this stuff's for sale. Anyone wants to buy anything, just come in here and ask me how much.
I might be interested in the sound booth.
Yeah, I know. There's so many bits that we're yet to go. Now, where's that going to go? Yeah.
Surely someone will get the sauna. Come on.
Yeah, well, I think they all should. I mean, they're all very complicated and they're all special, very personal objects. So I think they will have a life.
Church pews, a seat, and a sauna.
Yeah, we made those from scratch, custom.
Yeah, really?
Yeah, even made the stained glass in the side to match the graffiti on the windows. Wow. I don't know if you noticed that.
No, I didn't.
There's the kind of pink, orange, and green graffiti on the windows that is matched in the stained glass and the pews. We really went all out. So we'll live a long life. Like that thing's built to last, even though it looks a bit dingy on the outside.
Very cool. Okay, well, I guess that's it. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to mention?
Not that I can think of, but yeah, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing to be a part of.
Thanks, Mike. That was Mike Hewson, based in Sydney, coming to you from inside his installation at Art Gallery of New South Wales. If you're in Sydney, you really should come experience this work in person. It will be open in the Tank, the lowest level of the new building of the Art Gallery, until August 2026. Sydney-siders can also check out his permanent installations at Pioneers Memorial Park in Leichhardt, at Simpson Park in St. Peters, and just opened his new installation at the Fish Market. You can also find his public playgrounds at Crown Street Mall in Wollongong or on South Bank Boulevard in Melbourne. To find out more about his work or maybe buy some merch, go to Mike's website, mikehewson.co.nz, and follow him on Instagram at Mike Hewson. Links to those, as well as everyone mentioned in this episode, are in the show notes and on our website, installationartpodcast.com. If you're still here and listening, that means you're the GOAT, and that maybe you can take a moment right now to leave us a 5-star rating. You can also leave a written review on Apple Podcasts or a comment on Spotify or YouTube. Ratings and reviews are the #1 most effective way to help this show grow and help me reach and invite more and more high-profile guests for future episodes. Thank you so much for listening and for supporting these in-depth conversations about installation art. Until next time.